share my story with you and some tidbits that I have found to be really helpful. And so my story began in the cannabis industry. Well, really, in my early 20s, I began using cannabis in lieu of alcohol, which was a really good move in retrospect because I come from a long line of alcoholics. So I think I had a lot of benefits just using it recreationally, not even thinking medical. You know, I went on to get married and have a baby and went to nursing school. So hadn't used cannabis in about a decade when I became really ill in 2012. I was working full time at the hospital in acute care. I did ortho neuro post-op and also critical care cardiac. I was working at the cath lab. I was also working full time towards my master's degree, master's in science and nursing, as a step towards becoming a nurse practitioner. I was about 18 months away from completing that goal when I became very ill. I was actually labeled totally and permanently disabled in 2013 by my physician after about a year and a half of trying to find solutions for my complex problems. And at that point, I was also, in addition to becoming disenchanted with mainstream and their lacking efficacy in the approaches they were recommending for me, and it was a really complex immune, autoimmune, lots of factors. I was also in a lot of pain. One of my diagnoses was lupus, and I have since found out just 2 years ago, I finally got an answer that kind of explained everything. It's Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It's a genetic collagen disruption. And my main symptom today is that I have randomly dislocated joints. So very painful. And so I knew I didn't want to go down that opioid death pathway. I mean, as nurses, most of us are probably like, I'm never taking opioids unless it's like post-surge for a week or something, right? So I looked at cannabis as an alternative to opioids, and it was very effective. You know, I was very, very fortunate because this was 2013, 2014, and Oregon had legal medical access. So I signed up for that. What I had available to me was that a friend of mine was a grower and he donated some White Widow trim, and my husband made me RSO with acetone, which today I say, don't do that. As we know better, we do better. But that's what I had at the time. So homemade quality, all that was available was THC and THCA, where today we have dozens of possible formulations at our disposal. So I was very fortunate to have the outcomes I did, which not only included pain relief, lifting of my brain fog. I literally, when I was sick, I had days I couldn't form sentences, I couldn't find my words, I couldn't write a paper, and ended up dropping out of school 5 credits shy of my master's degree because of that. So it was very life altering. And cannabis also went on within 6 months of starting RSO daily. My lupus labs seroconverted and I became negative for lupus. So that's what really got my attention. I thought, wow, as a nurse, how cannabis do something that the pharmaceuticals I was on, the Plaquenil, the methotrexate, the prednisone, couldn't touch that outcome, right? So I started to deep dive into the research to try to understand my outcomes. And I, of course, found research that sort of explained it, that THC, especially can actually suppress the T cell response that drives the autoimmune self-attack. So that to me explained to me how my lupus labs went from positive to negative on cannabis. Huge passion maker. About a year later, my daughter, who happens to have autism, entered puberty and went into a behavioral crisis where she was self-injuring, she was aggressing and beating up everybody in her vicinity. She destroyed my house. We had holes through every wall, holes through doors, broken glass, broken windows. It was a really pretty scary time. And at that time, I was pretty comfortable with cannabis and had done quite a bit of research, comfortable with its safety profile. And I began to kind of compare cannabis with the mental health pharmaceutical options for autism, which FDA approval is Risperidone and Abilify. But there's a lot of off-label use of anti-seizure meds. There's the benzodiazepines, anxiolytics, antidepressants, antipsychotics. Those are all used really commonly for autism. And of course, the side effects are just horrific. Extrapyramidal symptoms, sometimes permanent. Even if you stop the drug, those symptoms can continue. They have, you know, not only potentially quality of life impairing, like breast development in males, but also life-threatening. There's suicidal ideation, there's Stevens-Johnson syndrome, there's neuroleptic malignant syndrome. All good reasons to say, let's go with the safer option first, which in my mind was cannabis. And so we started her on the cannabis therapy. It took us from being in crisis as a family And it helped us to kind of back away from that cliff and made our life at home manageable. And it spared my daughter out of home placement in 2015, which we narrowly escaped. She was actually living for 3 months in 2015. She was living part-time with a caregiver and part-time with parents. So we were so close to that becoming a reality, and cannabis spared us that additional trauma, which I'm just so thankful for. So these are some of my personal passion makers. In 2014, I began growing cannabis, mostly to make it affordable because I was disabled, I wasn't working, I had lost my career, I had lost, my income. And through growing, I began caregiving for patients. They would sign me on as their card, and I would grow for them. And I began getting that experience of what patients need and what kind of strains actually meet those needs and what differentiates the strains, the cannabinoids and the terpenes and all those wonderful ingredients. And so that taught me so much. And in 2015, as a cannabis consultant, as a nurse, and began working with patients. And that was such a wonderful immersion, and having that mentorship and having somebody that could kind of show me their process and, share the information, and even just having somebody as a nurse to bounce ideas off of, sort of like the charge nurse. We don't have that in this industry. So I really had a huge advantage getting into the industry. And I went on to consult with patients, thousands of patients over the next 4 years. And in 2019, in my state of Oregon, the Oregon State Board of Nursing made a decision basically prohibiting nurses' education of cannabis patients. We lovingly called it the Cannabis Nurse Gag Order. And that happened in November of 2019. And it was a misinterpretation on their part of a statute that it was an omnibus bill. So it only applied to certifying physicians. And the Oregon State Board of Nursing actually expanded upon, that law reach by saying it applies to nurses, and we're gagging nurses. And so my attorney and I were very fortunate. In 2021, we fought it. And so we got it overturned in April of 2021. Now that we've solidified that nurses can educate cannabis patients in this state under our license, can we adopt a scope of practice so that nurses are not forced to operate in a gray area in ethically serving these patients in need?
If you find these conversations empowering, then you may want to join us in the Highline Tribe. We are a community of nurses and healers who are seeking alignment. Try the tribe today for a step towards a transformative journey towards wellness and knowledge. See you on the inside.